Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at if statements in JavaScript, and these are going to allow us to create a conditional flow in our application so that we're able to make decisions based off of variables that are inside of our program. So let's jump over to our code and take a look at what that looks like. So from the last video, we had some variables that were included inside of our file here, this JavaScript file. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and clear this out, and we're going to write some new code in its place. And this code is going to use if statements in order to make some form of decision. So we should think about what kind of decision we want to make. One thing that we could do is we could, for instance, have maybe a price for something, and we could have how much money the user has paid and determine if they are equal to each other to see if they are able to afford the item that we are trying to sell. That could be an example of a way to use an if statement. So let's give that a try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable. So I'm going to have a variable called price item. I'm going to set it equal to, let's say 300, just pick a random number. And I'm going to say var user payment, and I'm going to set this equal to 300 as well. I'll start it with 300. What an if statement does is it says if, and then in brackets, we put some sort of condition that can be either true or false. If the condition is true, the code for that if statement is executed. If the statement ends up being false, then we don't execute the code. So that's the main idea of an if statement. So with this idea, we could say if the price of the item is equal to the user payment. Notice that I put two equal signs here. Two equal signs indicates equality in JavaScript. A single equal sign indicates assignment. So a single equal sign says that we are assigning a value to a variable. Two equal sign says we are checking to see if two variables are the same as each other. So this is checking the equality of these two items. So it's saying if these two items are equal to each other, and then much like our function inside of these brace brackets is what executes if this condition here is true. So if the condition is true, this piece will run. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to alert and say payment successful. So we could say alert payment successful. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like. Let's go over here and let's open up our file here. We'll refresh and we will click on this. And as you can see, we get payment successful because the two variables are equal to each other. Now, what I'll show you here is if I change these variables to not be equal, say the user payment is less than the price of the item, well, then what's going to happen is when I click on the button, well, nothing will happen, right? Oh, I of course have to refresh the page. And now nothing will happen, right? So you can see that in this case, nothing is happening because of course the condition is not true. So this condition here is not true, so nothing between these two brackets will run. So that would be the idea of the if statement. Now the question is now, what if we wanted something to run on the condition that the statement was not true? So, well, one thing that we could do is we could flip this to say does not equals. And the way that we do that is we put an exclamation mark and an equal sign. That means does not equals. However, maybe I want to have both conditions, right? Maybe I want to say, payment successful if they're equal to each other. Then if they do not equal to each other, then we want to say something else. To do that, we can use what's called an else statement, which we type in like this, else. What this else statement does is it runs something on the condition that this is not true. So if this is not true, rather than just running nothing, it comes down to this else condition and runs this instead. So what I could do is I could say alert payment failed. That would be an example of what we could do. And let's go ahead and run that now and see what happens. So let's refresh. You click on this and you can see payment failed now because the first condition did not succeed. So we went into the else statement instead. So that would be the way that we can set up our if statements. Now, of course, inside of the else, we can do all sorts of other things. We could do another if statement to check another condition, for instance, and we could do all sorts of other things, right? We can really write anything inside of these two brace brackets and it will execute with the else. Same deal with the if. We can write anything in these two brace brackets and it will execute with that if statement. So that should give you a solid idea of how these if statements work. One thing that I'll quickly do here is just talk about some of the other conditions that exist. So like I said, equals is two equal signs. Does not equals is the exclamation mark and the equal sign. We have greater than or equal to. we have less than or equal to, we have less than, we have greater than. Those are the main sort of Boolean conditions that we have available to us. There are other things in JavaScript that can be true or false, not necessarily just these conditions here. There are some functions that might return true or false as well. However, this is sort of out of the scope of what we're talking about in this video. I really just want to get you the fundamental ideas of if statements. And at this point, you should have that idea. So generally, you know how to write an if statement now. You know what an else statement is. You know the various different conditions that we can use to compare values. And that should be good enough to sort of get us up and started. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. In the next video, I'm going to talk about a few other interesting types of data that we can have inside of JavaScript. And then we'll discuss some further ways to manipulate that data using things like loops.